Hello everyone. In this video, we are going to talk about the boat's polars. But before we continue, please don't forget to subscribe to this channel, because Avalon is a product that is evolving very quickly. Polar is actually a shortcut for velocity prediction polar, which represents the boat's speed prediction curves based on the wind's strength and the wind's angle. In order to accurately determine the most optimal course for a sailing vessel, the weather router requires two absolutely crucial pieces of information, namely dependable weather forecasts and predictive speed curves for that specific boat, which must be as precise as humanly possible. Avalon Offshore is, without a doubt, the most powerful software available on the market for managing polar data. It allows you to manage them in various ways. You can input your own polar tables into the system in .pol format. You can select them from a library containing more than 500 sailboats. You can also calculate their performance using Avalon VPP, and that is precisely the main objective of this video. Furthermore, you can record your actual speeds at sea during real navigation and then manage all of that data with Avalon Cloud. Avalon also includes a graphic editor for polar designs. You can easily transfer them between various tablets and phones, no matter the operating system, whether it's iOS, Mac, Android, and so on. Thanks to Avalon Cloud. And if a boat is missing and you don't wish to calculate it yourself with Avalon VPP, you can ask us to add it. The polars that you're able to find are most frequently calculated by the boat builder, or they originate from ORC certificates. They are typically provided for just one sail, a composite sail type, and it's very uncommon to find them sail by sail. They ignore the operating conditions for different types of sails, whether it's a used sail, a new sail, a cruising sail, or a racing sail. That is not at all the same thing. They do not take into consideration the additional weight that you carry when you go cruising. We are not always in a race, and they take even less into account the capabilities, and the preferences of the crew. On a cruise, you might find yourself needing to request that the boat heels less to ensure a more comfortable journey. As a result of all this, they're far too optimistic for most cruises, and even for races, they won't be accurate enough because they won't take into account the different sails that the racer carries on board, often 7, 8 sails with multiple genoas, multiple genakers, and so on. Avalon 5PP was created to address all these problems. It's a true naval architecture software that will require quite a few parameters, but in return, you'll get great precision and polars calculated sail by sail. It is completely free, unlike certain other programs you might find available on the market, which I would characterize as Mickey Mouse software, entirely magical, capable of calculating polars for you using only 4 parameters. Avalon, for its part, will demand many more parameters from you, and it will enable you to consider all the parameters of your vessel, your sail inventory, as well as the capabilities and preferences of your crew. This will allow you to calculate a polar for any sail combination, whether it's the mainsail, the genoa, the jib, the solent, the code 0, spinnaker, genaker, and so on. And you can create as many of them, as many as you wish. What's more, when you calculate your route, it will indicate for each waypoint the heeling angle as well as the recommended sail reduction to stay within the authorized heeling limit. Unfortunately, Avalon 5PP is not able to accurately calculate the polar diagrams of a multi-hull. The theory doesn't work. So, what we recommend for calculating precise multi-hull polars is to take a roughly equivalent multi-hull from our polar library and then to acquire some data at sea and adapt these polars to your own multi-hull. In order to calculate your polars with Avalon 5PP, you will need to go to our official website. You must then proceed to select your specific boat or a very similar vessel. Okay, if your boat isn't on the list, there are still hundreds, we'll add it. You'll fill out the questionnaire, first about the hull of the boat, then you'll fill out a questionnaire for each sail you want to calculate. If you have multiple genoas, for example, a genoa, a jib, and a staysail, you'll need to perform this operation several times, calculating it for the genoa and then for the staysail. You will then run the calculations, one calculation per sail. Since the calculations are quite complex, you can anticipate waiting anywhere from 15 to 20 seconds for each sail. If you happen to have multiple Genoas, for instance, both a J2 and a J3, you would first deploy the J2. Following that, you would then request Avalon to provide you with the necessary code, and subsequently, you would then launch the J3. You ask Avalon to run the code for you, but you mainly remember the order in which you launched the calculations. You specify the email address where you wish to receive these calculations. You are going to receive an 8-digit code, and it is with this 8-digit code that from Avalon you will be able to download the polars for the sail you have just calculated. Please allow 1 to 2 minutes for the code to arrive. As I was mentioning before, next you will need to return to your tablet, open up the Avalon Offshore application, and then go into the boat's specific settings. And then you either click, if it's a brand new vessel, on Create a Boat from Avalon 5PP, or if you wish to add a sail to an already existing boat, then you will navigate to Modify My Boat and subsequently input the code from Avalon 5PP, the polars, but not exclusively the polars. The polar speed data, but also the heel and the performance reduction, are then loaded. You can edit them, use them for routing. That's it. We'll now see, with actual screens, how it works. So, you go to our website and click on Polar. Then, you choose your boat. If you don't find it, you can simply take a relatively similar boat and then adjust all the parameters, right? Because everything is fully configurable within the software. Or, if you prefer, you can just ask us to add it, and it will take us 24 to 48 hours at most to make it available for you in Avalon CPP. You select your boat, you then select your preferred metric, either the European metric or the American metric, and you give it a name. You will then input the number of crew members on trapeze, the average weight of each crew member, the trapeze arm, if a trapeze is used, and then the maximum allowed heel. Now, don't forget that with this system, you can compute as many polars as you desire. So, you can have a regatta polar and a cruising polar for each individual sail. Next, let's move on to the hull. Now, obviously, you won't have all the necessary parameters readily available to you. However, there are some parameters that you already know because they are part of the manufacturer's specifications. But to make things easier for you, on the one hand, we've placed small diagrams on the right. When you click on one of the parameters, it displays the specific data we're expecting. We also have a certain number of default buttons. The purpose of these default buttons is to allow you to input an average value, which you can then complete more precisely later on, for example, when you perform the boat's annual hull maintenance. Next, we move on to the mainsail, right? You'll first see the sail type, or rather, the kind of sail, which will vary between used racing, used cruising, and new cruising. It's important. It greatly affects the boat's speed. Then, the traditional sail formats. PE, the surface area of course, mast heights, etc. But as usual, you can always use the default button. That will input the data, allowing you to perform the calculations initially. So, we'll move on next to the Genoa. We only have one index for the Genoa, so we'll have to adjust the LPG and other data, the LPG, to determine the Genoa's overlap percentage. So, if you're working with J2, J3, or J4, you'll need to calculate a specific sail for each, taking into account different LPG measurements and potentially different halyard attachment points. You will then proceed to perform the exact same operation for the code 0. And of course, this also applies to spinnakers, whether they are symmetric, asymmetric, genakers, and so on. And potentially the mizzenmast, provided that you are operating a ketch or perhaps a schooner. Whenever you feel that you are ready to begin calculating one or even several of your sails, well then, you simply click down at the bottom on a specific button that corresponds to the particular sail that you are looking to calculate. After about 15 or 20 seconds have passed by, a polar diagram is going to appear right there on the screen for you. We only show the display for 5, 10, 15, and 20 knots, but in reality, the polars themselves are actually calculated all the way up to 30 knots and go down as far as 6 knots. And furthermore, they are also interpolated for all of the lower wind speeds that might occur. After that, all you have to do is simply enter your personal email address into the email field located at the very bottom of the screen and then press the button that says Send Email. So and then, approximately 1 or 2 minutes after that has passed, you are going to receive an 8-digit verification code in your email inbox, which corresponds directly to the sale that you have just finished calculating. After that, please go back into the software application on your tablet device and navigate your way into the boat settings menu. If you're currently creating your own boat and this happens to be the very first polar that you're entering, you should click on Create My Boat from Avalon 5PP. However, if it is a polar that you're adding to a boat that already exists, at that point, what you do is go to Edit My Boat and then select Import from Avalon 5PP. You name your polar diagram so that you can easily find it later, and then you're all finished. After that, your polar diagram is included in your boat's set of polars. You can then select or deselect it. Well, that's it. I'm ending this video here. I hope I've convinced you that Avalon Offshore is the most powerful software for polar management, and also that polars are absolutely essential for calculating accurate routes. I would like to thank you very much for your attention, and I will see you again very soon for a new video.